tempo and the time. Come on, y'all, let's roll.
And now, Tempo and the Times, the podcast that examines the collision of news, popular culture, and technology. With your hosts, Bob Gaddy and Scott Raminger.
Good morning, I'm Scott Raminger here on Tempo and the Times with my co-host, Bob Gaddy. Say hello, Bob.
Hey, guys. Thanks for joining up with us today. I think we got a great show for you.
And our guest today is an old friend of mine, a fantastic piano player who's played with all kinds of people, and I'm going to let him tell you mostly about that. But he was slated to take Pinetop Perkins' job in Muddy's band, Muddy Waters, and he also played frequently with Chuck Berry. And he does his own thing. He's made a lot of records. He played a lot of gigs of his own. Sometimes I played some saxophone for him once in a while, and we played together on some pretty kooky gigs, one of which I'll talk about later as it relates to the other subject we're going to be covering. But Daryl, why don't let's talk about the music thing first. Tell our listeners how you got interested in playing the piano as a youngster and how you came up in music and got to where you are today in the music world.
Sure. Well, I just turned 63 years of age, so I'm not an old friend of yours. I'm a young friend of yours for a long time.
Me too. I'm 1 year younger than you, buddy.
Yeah.
Bob's the old man of the group.
Yeah, hell, I got you guys by about 15 years.
There you go. Well, as a kid, my hero was James Bond, and I grew up. Well, I didn't grow up. I'm still trying to grow up.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that to happen.
Yeah, my wife keeps telling me, when are you going to grow up? And I say, why should I do that?
Exactly. That's how I feel. But I always wanted to be James Bond. And even today, believe it or not, I still have my James Bond 007 briefcase where you push a button on the handle and it fires a plastic bullet.
I'm glad it's plastic at least.
Yeah, I got my 007 decoder belt, all that stuff. Probably worth a fortune now, but I got it packed away. But anyway, James Bond was my hero, and also computers. I was always fascinated with computers. And back then, computers took up more than that room that you're sitting in.
I know. My dad worked for IBM.
Yeah, well, kids today can't even conceive of that. When you got a computer, this small. But I knew they would get smaller. I never dreamed they'd become the size of a cell phone because we didn't have cell phones back then. But I knew they would get smaller. I knew there was money involved. However, both vocations were pulling at me in opposite directions with equal force. So I was immobilized. Am I going to be a spy or am I going to be a computer programmer? I couldn't go either way because both of them were going to be equal.
You decided to become a piano player instead.
So
you're going to have to connect some dots for me here, buddy.
Well, I'm going to show you that transition, how I crossed that bridge. Well, I kept trying to think, how can I combine the two, spying and computers? There was no way to combine them back then. Today, it's very easy. It's called cyber espionage.
Yeah, you'd be all set today.
Yeah, I'd be all set.
You'd be a troll, man. You could be a Russian troll. There might still be time. You could look. You could look on one of those job sites. Maybe the Russians are advertising for people.
I could rig the elections and stuff.
Yeah, you could.
Just rig them the right way, okay?
I tell you what. Why don't you come down here to South Carolina? You could do that.
All right. Let Daryl.
If I was a cyber espionage agent, I would have to come down there to South Carolina. I'd do it right here where I'm sitting.
That's right. That's right. You could.
Okay. So anyway, I couldn't decide which one I was going to do because each one was pulling at me equally, and I made what some people would call the mistake of going to see Elvis Presley Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
And I've always liked music. I didn't play anything. I couldn't play. You know?
And how old were you at this point?
I was 13.
So you didn't take piano lessons when you were 6 or any of that?
I took 3 lessons when I was 8. And all I learned was a scale. Da 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 da. You know, that was it. And my first lesson with the right hand, second lesson with the left hand, third lesson hands together. And I wanted to play songs, man. You know, what's all this do, re, mi, fa, so stuff? So I quit because it wasn't any fun. Right. Now, of course, in retrospect, that's the foundation of music.
Right.
You know, I should have stayed with it. But anyway, I quit and I joined the Cub Scouts. And that was a lot more fun. Get to tie knots and go camping.
And where were you? Where was all this happening? Where did you grow up?
I grew up all over the world. My parents were U.S. Foreign Service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I started traveling at the age of 3. And you live in a country for 2 years. You come back home here. You're here for a few months, maybe a year. And you get reassigned to another country abroad. Now, when you combine my childhood travels with my adulthood travels as a musician touring and things like that, I have now been in a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents. And I've played in 49 of our 50 states. So, but anyway, I'll get to that in a second. So while I'm trying to decide how can I combine these 2 vocations, spying and computer programming, some people said I made the mistake of going to see Chuck Berry and Elvis Presley, and that changed my life. You know, I always liked their music, but when I saw them perform, it was like, whoa, that's what I want to do. And spying and computering, went out the window. And despite the fact that I couldn't play anything.
Details. That didn't stop me when I first started, as you probably remember.
So, I began teaching myself, learning to play by ear. I was never in high school band because I couldn't play. But I had friends who were in high school band, marching band, jazz band, concert band, etc. And they would show me little things on the piano, and I would practice the heck out of them. And then I went out and bought books and taught myself how to read music. And when it came time for me to graduate, I wanted to major in music. My parents did not want me to. I understand now why, but we fought round and round about it. But I had to audition. I auditioned for Berklee School of Jazz up in Boston, Howard University in DC, and Morehouse in Atlanta. And surprisingly, I passed all 3 auditions.
Wow!
Despite the fact that I was self-taught and really had no experience.
Right.
So I chose Howard because it was close to home, and I went there and I majored in music. I graduated 4 years later with my degree in jazz, and I've been playing and performing ever since.
So you had to go back, I guess, when you got to Howard, you probably had to go back and kind of learn some of.
I had to learn the damn scales.
Right. Not just the major one, all those jazz.
Yeah, you learn the major, minor, all the modes, everything.
Hey, I heard it. I'm going to interject a good joke here. I think it's a good joke. You'll like it, I think.
All right.
What's the number for the jazz police?
What's the number for the jazz police?
Flat 911.
Okay.
That's a musician joke, Bob.
Yes, it is.
I did think it was very funny, Scott.
Well, it's going to be funny to a limited subset of our listeners, I suppose. Daryl and I laugh. Well, continue. So you're in Howard, and did you?
Bob, if it were because it's jazz, it has to be flat 9. Or you could have said sharp 911, either one. But you can't be 911. That's not jazz. That's just
no.
It's also a sort of a dissonant thing because a flat 9 is actually, if you look at the piano,
the sharp 1.
Yeah, it's like playing a C and a C sharp at the same time. It's playing a white key and a black key on the piano at the same time and producing sort of a.
Well, technically, what you're saying, is if you want to get technical about it,
Octave.
If you're playing a flat 9, it's not like playing a C and a C sharp.
Yeah.
You're playing a C and a D flat.
Yes, that is true. That's real. That's some real jazz stuff. Yeah, I hate it when or people write double flats, but we're getting into murky territory here, Daryl. Back to your career. Did you start playing though? Once you got the bug and you were teaching yourself, were you gigging around or playing with other cats trying to play?
No, I wasn't.
Howard?
I was not capable really of playing in a band, but I was singing. So I had good musicians around me, high school musicians around me and stuff. And I was a vocalist while I was.
But you were performing out. You were performing in some way, but you're not yet playing the piano in public.
Correct.
And did you get into like the Howard Jazz Ensemble? Howard has a good music, or I think it does now. I don't know how it was.
Yeah, it's always had a good music ensemble, the Howard Jazz Ensemble. No, I did not play with them, but I sang in the Howard Jazz Choir.
Okay. So now you're out of college. What happens next?
Well, I started playing full time, and
for other people, or did you just start?
Well, I started out with playing in country western bands, and
were you the only black guy in the band?
I was the only black guy in the band, and usually the only black guy wherever we played. And
I can only. It sounds like
these were real bona fide country bands, not these plastic bands.
Right.
Work downtown, white collar executives who decide to put on a Stetson and
it was like out on Route 1 down there on those bars down.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I knew them all, played them all. Some of them didn't want to let me in, things like that. Yeah, I went through that too. For example, the Moose Lodge. The Moose Lodge had a policy: no blacks, not even as guests, not even as entertainers. And the band that I was in.
What year would that have been?
This would have been 1983.
Yeah, it's like the Civil War's been over for a long time, boy. Like 100 years at this point.
And where was that? Where was it?
It was several places. Lanham, Maryland, Rockville, Maryland, where I live, right next to where I live, and Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Well, I can tell you this, and this would have been, say, about probably in the early 2000s. I played on a gig in Southern Maryland with Daryl. I mean, in Southern Maryland is one of the most racist places I've ever been, honestly, parts of it, I lived there for a minute, but we were playing at that place. I think it was called the Country Store.
Yep. And they would not let me in about 2 years before that.
Well, you know what? I never said this to you, but while we were on a break, I heard two guys out saying, "What's the deal with that nigger in there?" And I was like, I was shocked. I mean, at this point even that someone would say that out loud. I mean, it wasn't like he was whispering it. He was saying it to everyone who was around. You know what I mean? And it really...
Everyone but me, because he probably would have got his ass kicked.
Yeah, I know that. And, I know that. But, I mean, I lived down... What I'm saying is I was really... I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. But, I mean, racism and in music, it ain't gone. You know what I mean? It's not really. And really the truth is, I mean, even now in DC, I mean, really, and I don't know if some of it's cultural probably, but you don't find a lot of bands that are half black guys and half white guys. Sometimes you'll find like one white guy. Like I knew a couple of white guys who played with Chuck Brown. His band was mostly black, but he had a white trombone player, and or you'll find one black guy in the mostly white band, but you don't really see like three black guys and three white guys in a band together, do you?
You do upon occasion. It's not, it depends upon where you are. Upon occasion, yeah, but not as the norm. But one time in one of the country bands I played with, we played the Gambrels, Maryland Gambrels Athletic Club.
Right.
And I got there early because I had no idea where this place was. So I left early, so I wouldn't get lost. And I was the first person to arrive. And so I walk in, and the ladies were in there setting up the tables And as soon as I walked in, they're like, we're playing a bull roast, right?
Right.
And so I'm the only person there other than the women setting up. And I walk in, they're like, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm with the band." "Oh, you're here to load in their equipment?" Like I'm a roadie, right? So I went ahead and said, "Yeah." So she points, she says, "The stage is right there." As though I couldn't see it, big as day. Anyway, I went back outside, got my stuff, brought it in, set it up. And so I'm just sitting around killing time until, the band guys arrive. So now, they finally arrive, one by one. And I'm out there helping the bass player. Now, everybody in the band is white, right? I'm helping the bass player, load his stuff in. I'm going back and forth to his car, bringing stuff in. Well, about this time, guests are coming. They're pulling into the parking lot. They paid their money or tickets for the bull roast. They're coming in, getting seated and stuff. I'm walking back and forth to this guy's car and bringing stuff in. So, the band gets all set up. We get sound checked, and then we play. And on the first break, the bass player goes outside to smoke something, a cigarette or whatever.
Yes.
And he comes back in. All 4 of his tires were slashed.
Oh,
Somebody thought that was my car.
Oh my God.
They didn't slash one, they slashed all 4.
Yeah, I know. It's terrible. Well, how did you get then? That's an odd thing. I never knew the country side of Daryl Davis. This is intriguing to me that you play.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, listen, man. Listen, country and blues,
It's a cousin.
it's the exact same music.
I understand. Yeah, it's really the same. It is the same thing. Very similar.
Exactly.
It all has.
I call them kissing cousins.
That's right. And rock and roll. I mean,
Absolutely.
most popular music, really. But so how did you, because right now I would say, if anything, you're known as a boogie woogie piano player of that, that's how I think of you, as that plus, you know what I mean? How did you get into that? How did you get from the country thing into the world where you were hanging around with guys like Pinetop? How did you meet Pinetop, and how did you go that direction?
This is a great spot to take a break and pay a couple of bills, and then we'll be back.
Okay, well, when I saw Elvis and I saw Jerry Lee, then I began seeing, because I like that kind of music, the 50s rock and roll, original rock and roll, the only rock and roll in my book. Anyway, when I saw those guys, I decided, that's what I want to do. Well, in order to be able to play that style authentically, you have to know where they got it from. What were they listening to? There was no rock and roll before Chuck Berry.
Right.
There was jump blues, there was boogie woogie, there was swing, there was always country, you know. So what were they listening to, that gave them that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, So they listened to people like Elmore James, Muddy Waters, Meade Lux Lewis, Pete Johnson, Albert Ammons, and Louis Jordan, and all this great stuff. So I began going backwards, listening to what they listened to and coming forward. And because piano was my instrument, I could identify most of the piano players on people's records because I recognized the style. Back then, a lot of times they didn't put the people's names who played on the records, and they certainly didn't put their pictures on there. If it was a Muddy Waters album, you might see Muddy Waters on there, but you wouldn't see Pinetop's face, So I knew the names, I knew the styles, and everything. And I studied, and everything that I had read about Pinetop indicated that he was pretty old. And, by this time, I thought, he'd long since passed away. So Muddy Waters was playing at a place called the Cellar Door in Georgetown.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is a part of Washington, D.C. And he was going to be there for a week. And Chuck Berry got his start through Muddy Waters. Chuck Berry had hitchhiked to Chicago from St. Louis. And he wanted to go see Muddy Waters because that was his idol. And so he saw Muddy, and he told Muddy he played guitar. Muddy let him sit in, and Muddy had never heard guitar playing like that before. and said, you need to go down and see Leonard Chess. Gave him the address, sent him over to Chess Brothers Studio. And they said, do you have any songs of your own? And Chuck went back to St. Louis, composed a couple songs. One was Wee Wee Hours, and the other one was Maybelline.
Right.
And, the rest is history. So Muddy was the one who got Chuck his record deal.
Right.
And so, I wanted to go see Muddy Waters.
Why not? If it weren't for Chuck.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there. I was too young to get in, but I looked older than I was.
Right.
So I didn't need a fake ID. And anyway, so the place is packed. I'm sitting on the steps, and I'm watching the band, and this guy playing piano, he sounded just like Pinetop Perkins. And I figured this guy must have studied with Pinetop. He was an older dude, but I'm just fascinated with this guy because he sounded like somebody that I really liked. And so Muddy went into this song called Caledonia, old Louis Jordan song.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
then on the solo, he goes, "Take it, Pinetop." I said, "Oh my God, that's him. That's Pinetop." So afterwards, I sneaked up the backstage stairs and I knocked on the dressing room door. And Guitar Jr., who was one of Muddy's guitar players, it was Guitar Jr. and Bob Margolin. Guitar Jr. opened the door. "Hey, come on in, young fella." And I came in, and Muddy Waters was sitting there playing cards with Calvin Jones, Fuzz, and Willie Big Eyes Smith. They're sitting there playing cards. And Muddy says, "How you doing, young man?" I said, "Hi, Mr. Waters. I really liked your show, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Where's Pinetop?" He goes, "Oh, he's around the corner in the kitchen." So I walked around the corner, and there was Pinetop standing there. And man, I just melted. There was my idol right there. And he was the nicest man as could be. And I said to him, "Would you have lunch with me tomorrow?" And he said, "Oh, I got a radio interview at 2:00, but after that, I ain't doing nothing." "Yeah, I can do that." He didn't even know me.
Yeah.
That was Pinetop.
Yeah.
And so I was all excited. I went home and told my parents that I was going to bring Pinetop Perkins home for lunch the next day. They're like, "Daryl, that's not going to happen. He's probably just trying to placate, a young boy."
So were you still in high school at this point?
Yeah, I was like a senior.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, Daryl, come to your senses and stuff." I said, No, you got to make lunch for him. And next morning I woke up. I'm here to go downtown. My father follows me out of the house into the driveway. He goes, "Now, Daryl, I realize you may have met Pinetop Perkins or whatever, but don't, if you get down there and he's not there or he doesn't want to come, don't coerce him. Just, be happy that you met him because he's probably not going to come out here. He probably gets this kind of stuff all the time." And I said, no, he told me he's going to come. Well, my dad was trying to, break it to me gently that.
Right.
So anyway, I go downtown. He was staying at Hotel Harrington down around 11th and E Street.
Right.
So I go up to his room and the door is cracked. And I knock on the door. He goes, "Come in." I came in. There he was sitting on the edge of his bed in a suit and tie and his hat on, ready to go.
Wow.
I brought him out to my house in Potomac, Maryland.
That's pretty funny.
And when he walked in, my mom about fainted.
That must have been something for you as a.
Yeah.
What were you, 17, 18?
I was like, right between 17 and 18.
Yeah.
I graduated.
How old?
The first thing he did was walk over to the piano and sit down and start playing.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah. And I'm like, "Show me that. Show me. How'd you do that?" He sat there and showed me stuff. And then from that point forward, whenever he would come to town and stuff, he would stay at my house.
Wow.
And
I remember when I first met Daryl, and I didn't really know even who he was that much. And he said to me, "Hey, come down to the Glen Echo Ballroom because Pinetop Perkins is playing a gig with me, and you can like sit on the side of the stage and watch if you want." And I did just that, and sure enough, it was unbelievable. It was so cool to watch that guy. Really, you must have learned so much from him.
I did. Pinetop and Johnny Johnson. I mean, those guys really took the time with me and taught me a lot of stuff.
What other piano players really influenced you?
Sunnyland Slim. I like Otis Spann, Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard, Fats Domino. But you know what? When I was learning to play, I went out and saw and met everybody. I met Earl Father Hines. I met Liberace. I met Rachel. Yeah. I mean, I didn't care what the genre was. You know, if you played piano, I want to see you. I want to borrow from you. I want to learn something from you. Liberace was very flashy, very flamboyant, if you will. So I saw how that interacted with the audience. Okay, so I need to be a little flashy. I need to be this. I need to be that. You make big motions with your hands while you play.
Right.
That kind of stuff. So, everybody contributed to how Daryl Davis plays piano.
Yeah. And he does know all these cats. I mean, one time, again, I went when Little Richard was still alive.
Uh-huh.
I went to Annapolis and Little Richard was playing and Daryl was there and he introduced me to Little Richard and he introduced me to all of the guys in the band. And I've since re-met Kelvin Hawley, who lived in Muscle Shoals down here near Nashville. But then the next night I had a gig and what was the sax player?
Walker.
Yeah, he brought him to my gig and he sat in, Daryl sat in, and we just had a big old time. So you went on to you performed a lot with Chuck Berry too. Tell us a little about that.
32 years. Not every gig, but a lot of gigs.
The big ones like the TV gigs. I mean, Chuck was famous for, a lot of people don't know this, and you can correct me anytime you want, Daryl, but Chuck Berry kind of had a reputation. He wanted to make the money himself, and he would go to towns and he would just hire whoever was around to play with him. I mean, even in a small town sometimes. And
let me correct it.
Okay.
Chuck Berry was as well known in the industry for his business acumen.
Yeah, he was. Yes, he was.
Okay, he got ripped off in the 50s, and he's one of those people who believes you don't let the same dog bite you twice.
Right, exactly.
So once you got ripped off, that was it. You pay me in advance, or I don't play.
Exactly.
Okay? So
in cash, usually.
Yeah. So he would walk into the venue, and without his guitar.
Yeah.
Without his guitar, he'd walk into the he'd pull up, walk into the venue, go to the promoter's office, get his money in cash, and then go back out to the parking lot, get his guitar out of the car, and come back in.
Right.
If he didn't have his money, he was getting back in that car and driving back to the airport, and he was gone.
Right.
I've seen that. Now, and then the last probably 15 years of his life, you had to wire him the money 30 days in advance. So it was already in his bank account for 30 days before he left St. Louis to come to your gig. All right. And if more musicians would do that, we could turn this damn industry around.
That is true.
But Chuck did not hire the bands. He had in his contract the promoter had to supply him a 3-piece band.
Right.
Okay. Bass, drums, and piano, and these special, well, not special, but they're not made anymore. 2 Fender dual Strowman amplifiers.
Right. I know what they are. Those big ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Not one, but 2.
2 of them. Right.
Yeah. And if you didn't have them, he would fine you $1,000 per amplifier that you provided. So the promoter had to hire the bands, and unfortunately, a lot of promoters were trying to cut corners.
Exactly.
Chuck costs a lot of money, so they're just going to hire a bunch of local teenagers, who don't know the butt from a hole in the ground sometimes, and the show would be a disaster. But that wasn't on Chuck; it was on the musicians that were trying to.
Oh, and he would just go on playing. I mean,
exactly.
He would just keep playing. The guys, they'd be playing in the wrong place. I heard a couple of things that were just like a train wreck, and he just
one of the mistakes that they would make is Chuck Berry was a genius.
Yeah,
no about it. A lot of people can say, I played the guitar, I wrote a song, and somebody else sang my song. Fine, anybody can do that. But how many people can say, I invented a genre of music.
That's true.
You know, not that Chuck would say that, but he could. You know,
But, you know,
Beethoven could say it. Jimi Hendrix could say it. Chuck Berry could say it. You know, but not many people can say that.
That's true.
You know?
But one of my favorite clips, I don't know what movie it's in. It's some sort of music documentary, but it's Keith Richards, and it was
It's called Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll.
Yeah. And, you know, Chuck Berry was Keith Richards' guy. I mean, he was his idol, but
Right.
he was trying to explain something, or like, you should do it this way. You know, you're doing it wrong. And Chuck Berry just lit into it, man. And I was like,
Exactly. Exactly. You know, I played Keith Richards' 50th birthday party.
With Chuck?
No, with Johnny Johnson.
Oh, wow.
And Eric Clapton, Phil Spector was there.
Oh, my God.
All kinds of people were there.
You've had quite an adventurous life, Daryl, clearly, so far. And who knows what's going to happen next. Next week on Temple and the Times, we're going to get into how you became friends with members of the KKK and convinced some of them to leave the organization. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about race relations today in the Trump era and the post-Trump era. For Tempo and the Times, this has been Scott Ramager and Bob Gaddy. We'll be back next week with Daryl Davis. Don't miss it.
The only thing to do is keep running to the temple.
And the time. Come on, y'all, let's roll.
Copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Visit us at tempoandthetimes.com.